Welcome to the Meat Bags Podcast, a time where we get to sit down with casual conversations with friends to talk about all aspects of traditional skills, from business to meat processing, from conservation to physical training, and any rabbit trails that we might find in between. So Joel, thank you for joining me again for another podcast.
Yep.
We recorded one and it didn't quite work out.
Right, that was your fault.
Yep, that was entirely my fault. So here we are again. Hopefully this one will work. And so Joel's an old friend of mine, former pastor, my former pastor, still a pastor. He's in North Idaho now, moved out from Montana, and that's where he is, and that's where we are currently. Not exactly where you pastor, but we're a little bit south of there. And yeah, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Just first off with my podcast, I just kind of like to ask you a few hunting questions.
Sure.
We've been hunting a couple times.
Yeah.
We've slept in some wall tents. We've done some hiking, things like that sort. So I just want to ask you, what's your favorite type of hunting?
Every kind of hunting I've had the joy to participate in has really brought something different to the table. Bow hunting, whitetails in West Virginia out of a tree stand is its own element of fun. The kind of hunting that I would say surprised me most, I didn't think I would enjoy at all, but I loved it, was spring gobbler hunting out east in the hardwoods and hunting eastern turkeys. That's so much fun.
A lot of heritage with that back there.
Well, and just a lot harder than I thought. I really underestimated it at first, and I went a whole season and got completely skunked, and had to work really hard to actually learn what I was doing for the next year. So, small scale elk hunting, that's what they say turkey hunting is like, and it really is. It's a lot of fun. Bow hunting elk in southeast Montana is probably overall the most exhilarating. Things go from 0 to 100 just instantly. When you'll hear nothing all day, and then a bull will bugle 300 yards away, and suddenly things get really exciting really fast. So that's probably the most, I'd say, exhilarating.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many elk have you harvested?
I've killed 2 elk.
Killed 2? Both bulls?
Both bulls. One was a raghorn, and one was a decent bull in my estimation. For those who are familiar with scoring, he went just over 300 inches. But the funny thing is that the genetics are so good down there in southeast Montana. He was not even the herd bull. He was a satellite bull out of that bunch, which is why he was so eager to come in.
Yeah, just come charging in almost, don't they? Kind of the next thing with that too, I want to ask you, what about the meat? Do you enjoy eating elk?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Did you guys take it to just processor and get some stuff done, or do it yourself?
No, we did it ourselves.
Nice.
Yeah. Occasionally, if a year is really busy, we'll drop a deer off at a processor, but typically no. And we're not terribly skilled, so the entire thing is going to be either burger or steaks or stew meat. That's all we have the capacity and knowledge to do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's kind of brief, but I just want to kind of jump into it because this is going to be a different podcast for me. I want to talk to you a little bit more of the caveat to the name of the podcast, that we are far more than just bags of meat.
So you settled on a name. This is a development.
This is a development.
Meat bags. We said that at the same time.
Yeah, that was good.
That'll need to go in an intro.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Meat bags.
Meat bags. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we are far more than just bags of meat. I've heard it claimed that before, whether in the fire service or for some reason, a lot of ex-military guys love to call us bags of meat. So we want to talk about how important it is to be far more than that and act far more than that.
But there is also a hunting image there.
There is.
When
Absolutely.
You quarter an animal and leave it up in a tree or whatever, you're hanging meat bags.
You hang meat bags. So processing meat, hunting, growing your own meat. Yeah, it encompasses quite a bit, and obviously those are all God's creations as well. That is dominion being practiced, and we want to rejoice in that. So with this podcast, like I said, it's going to be a little bit different. So I want to talk with Pastor Joel a little bit about his move from a larger city to the smaller city he's at, town, village.
Technically a village.
Technically a
Yes.
village. Yep.
Yeah.
So is the village he lives in now, and the importance of church. I think that is something that is overlooked a lot in our society. We talk about moving for jobs or moving for even just relocation closer to family, and church often gets put on the back burner. So in this podcast, I want to talk about the importance of that and how that correlates with us being more than bags of meat. So, Joel, how has the move been to a small town? Did you grow up in a small town originally? Is this new to you?
Yeah, I was born in a town called Chester, which you and maybe 6 other people might be able to know off the top of your head on a map. And I was raised in small towns, essentially. Fort Benton, Montana, and Stevensville, Montana. So Stevensville being the larger of the two. It's around 2,000 people when I lived there. So my wife and I are both from small town, Montana. And that's really all we ever knew. And on top of that, my dad directed a nonprofit called the Rocky Mountain Bible Mission for a number of years, and that's an organization that still exists that helps place and train pastors in rural churches all over the Mountain West, mostly Montana and Idaho, mostly. I think maybe Wyoming as well. So we spent a lot of time, not just being raised in a small town, but exposed to a lot of different small towns and small town church settings. So, yes, I mean, a summary statement would be that small town Mountain West is familiar ground to me. And so the move from Bozeman, which by Montana standards is quite a large population. I think the population in the city is creeping up on 60,000, creeping up on it. People say that's not a large population. Well, no, it's not if you're from Phoenix. Or if you're from the Denver area, but that's one of the largest populations in Montana. So that is a lot of people, and it is a big adjustment when you're coming from a context of a few hundred or a few thousand. So when Jessica and I finally made the decision to take a position and relocate our lives to a small town, it's been a big change, but it's also kind of been like riding a bike, in that all the familiar aspects of a small town come right back to you. It's different now, though, that I'm an adult. Being in a small town now, I'm not just enjoying it as I did when I was a child. I'm actually participating in the major systems there because, as the only pastor in town, I am by default one of the major and more visible players in town. So a lot of it is familiar because I'm from a small town, but that aspect of being the pastor to this town, that's all brand new. And there is a learning curve already, and there's going to continue to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it puts you in a remarkable position, really, of influence in the community. I think we had talked about it a little bit before, but kind of up there with the chief of police or chief of the fire department or the volunteer department or whatever. You have it in a small community.
The town juggler.
The
living statue. All the major players.
Major players,
yeah,
exactly.
The sewer guy.
Yeah.
And the pastor.
Plumber.
And the pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool.
But it's true. I mean, just case in point, there are 2 ways into Bayview, where we live, the village where we live. There are 2 ways in, and they loop around to each other. And so there's a reader board at either entrance. And the city, or the village of Bayview, the village of Bayview put on both reader boards, "Welcome Pastor Joel and family."
Wow, that's really cool.
They don't all worship God. They don't all know Christ. But because they know that the town getting a pastor is a big deal, the village participated in publicly welcoming me.
Yeah, I mean, we're only guaranteed 2 things, taxes and death. So they all know that is coming, and I'm sure you're going to have the opportunity to sit at people's bedsides and really pastor people, even who aren't actually part of your flock even.
I was told that when I took the position that I'm not just a pastor to the people who show up on Sunday at Bayview Bible Church. I'm a pastor to the town. So people, yes, that's right. So people who pass away or the other significant life events, I'll be looked on to do.
Their weddings, I suppose.
I've already been called on to do a wedding.
Awesome.
Outside the church, people I've never met before. So I need to get used to that sort of thing and readjusting my thinking to really being a pastor to this entire populace. Whereas in Bozeman, I mean, it was 6 years into the church there. I still met Christians in town who had no idea our church existed.
Yeah.
Just a very, very different dynamic.
Yeah, very different for sure. And you have young kids as well.
Yes.
Living in a small town, you know what that's like growing up. It takes a village to raise children, preferably a Christian village.
Right.
Yes,
preferably, yes.
But you have and that's the hopes that Bayview
We'll
will
get there.
all be.
Yes.
So, but it's a large congregation for the small
Yeah.
town, correct? I mean, that's,
Yes.
if I remember, it's like 25% of the population
Well, the kind
in
of
the winter.
the static population of Bayview, and I've kind of had conflicting reports, but I think it's around 500 people.
Okay.
But to have 103 people on a Sunday is significant. You're right. Now,
Very
it's not, they're some of them are coming from outside of Bayview, but most of them are not.
Yeah, that's a really cool opportunity that you have. We also talked about it before that it can be a double-edged sword. So you have all this influence. You're under a microscope. People are watching you. They're watching your kids. It can also be a negative thing. Would you say?
Well, one dynamic of a small town is that everyone's watching. That it's just you are maybe much more guarded because your life overlaps with all these people, not just in church on Sunday, but in a variety of ways and avenues. So the people I see at church, I will also see at the swimming area, and I will also see at Super One at the grocery store, and I will also see walking down the sidewalk, et cetera, et cetera. So everyone lives a pretty visible life. There is a community Facebook page where opinions are expressed when people are dissatisfied with choices other people make that affect one another. So yes, we're kind of in a little snow globe there, and you only have so many bridges to burn.
Yep.
That's certainly true wherever you are. You don't want to wantonly burn bridges, but I would say that the stakes may be a little bit higher in a small town because there are so many fewer relationship possibilities, and for something like gospel witness and faithful church presence, you want to be really strategic in terms of what hills you die on, where you plant your flag, and when. I could give you some good examples, but people can use their imaginations, I'm sure. So just a lot of intentionality.
Yeah. So a question that I get often talking about raising chickens or things that aren't necessarily associated with the church, but essentially just learning new skills or jumping into anything new in general. Hunting as well are questions that I get. How do I start? Where do I start? Etc. Resources. I'm curious about, you grew up in a small town, small church, relatively. I mean, you grew up in that realm. So for somebody who's never done that, or they're moving from California, or they're moving from wherever, and they want to come to a small town, or they want to come to Bayview even, or any small town, what would you recommend for them? What do they need to look into as far as churches, and I guess availability of churches, church congregations, how they meet, or just small town life in general?
Yeah, well, I would tell anybody, don't move any place. I would tell any Christian, don't move in. I would tell any Christian, don't move anywhere unless you have a plan for your church body. Don't move to a town and say, I'm sure there's a lot of churches there. I'll figure it out when I get there. No, you might not. I'm sure there's a healthy church there. No, you're not. You're not sure about that. There might not be. There might not be. So you need to do your homework. So I tell Christians, look up churches in the area, call them, call the churches, schedule a time to talk with one of the elders or the senior pastor, and ask them hard questions. Like this is a day and age, and these last few years revealed so much about how essential church truly is. Ask hard questions of the pastors. What's your doctrinal stance on X, Y, and Z? What do you believe about this? How do you guys practice this? What is this? Can
you give me two questions that you would go, or you would tell somebody to, 3 questions?
Yeah,
say 3 questions.
Okay. I've already got 2 of them in my mind, and I'll come up with a third one in a minute. if I were to call a pastor or an elder and ask important questions about the church, one would be questions surrounding wokeness, and so I'm using wokeness as a broad term. So however you want to zero in on that, their understanding and their response to woke culture, basically, which, as we just heard at this conference we're at, is really a questioning of the Bible. Has God really said? So are you redefining justice? Are you redefining things like equality? Are you redefining things like biblical gender roles? I would ask very pointed and intentional questions to reveal, have you embraced this woke cult, this woke cult ideology? And then I would also ask, what does a typical Lord's Day gathering look like at your church? And you have to be willing to understand that a lot of small town churches are not going to have, what we might think of as like a robust high church liturgy. They might not be doing covenant renewal, styles of liturgy or singing from the Psalter, whatever. We don't sing from the Psalter, and I don't want to, although some of them are great. But so I'm not saying it must be exactly the way I want it or nothing, but there must be a level of intentionality, because if a church doesn't take Sunday seriously, they're not going to take anything seriously. So the point is not to get a liturgy designed in your own image. The point is that the pastor should have a ready answer. Oh, here's what we do on Sunday, and here's why. You should be able to stand behind every element of your liturgy and say, this is why we do this, and this is why this is good for you, the church member. And that might even be the third question: is what do you believe about membership? Do you have an avenue for people to formally covenant themselves to this church body for help, for accountability, and for participation? That might be my third question.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I know, again, we talked about this earlier, but my wife and I jumped into a position where we're at right now where...
Can I pause you? Because I want to answer the second part of your question.
Yes.
General advice for moving to a small town is your number one goal should be to learn how to fit into what's already going on.
What do you mean?
So what I mean is, you're not coming to change that place. You're coming to participate in that place. And so what that means largely, like number one priority, is to earn trust. So even if the church has some cultural things or some cultural norms that you might not understand or that you even think are dumb, I don't roll into town voicing that. Don't roll into town guns a-blazing. Don't make it easy on yourself. Don't try to stick out. You don't want to be a poser and pretend like you've been there your entire life either. But you ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. Take a genuine interest in the people. Oh, tell me the story behind this building. Oh, what was the industry of this town? Oh, what makes the people of this place tick? You're not going to figure that out overnight. So take time to just build genuine relationships. Ask a lot of questions. Laugh with these people. Be with them around the table, and just earn their trust. You don't want to show up on day one and on day two you go to the school board meeting or whatever, lobbying for change. Even if it's a good change, and even if you're right, that's foolish. You're gonna push these people away. So take the time to integrate, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Quick to listen and slow to speak.
Correct. So yeah, that sounds familiar.
Well, that's good. So we're talking about being quick to listen and slow to speak. It's wise when coming into, I would assume, anywhere. Well, that's in any situation.
Yes.
Proverbs tells us. So going into any
But
town.
in a small town, if you don't, you looked at me nervously there.
No, there's a bug.
But if you don't do that in a small town, I think you'll feel it quicker.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a more profound way.
You will, for sure. And your family will too.
Sure.
Your wife will feel it for sure. Your kids will definitely get it as well.
Yeah.
Especially if you have your kids in sports together with other people, etc. I mean, people are mean in general, wherever you are. That's just the humans in general. So important to find a church or move for a church even, and then find a job. Would you say?
Well, ideally, you'd have both in place before you go somewhere.
Well, ideally, yeah.
But there might be a situation where you need to go somewhere in faith, and you're convinced that you need to go So I'm not saying faith isn't a part of this, but I would absolutely affirm that the church is the biggest priority. You don't want to move into a place where you're going to have no support and you're not going to be connected to the body of Christ.
That's good. Yeah, again, we talked about this earlier. With my wife and I are in a similar situation where we placed ourselves hastily into a position where we're at, and you and another elder even came to us and talked to us, and we ignored your advice.
Did you listen?
Did not listen. We did not listen. But yeah, to be honest, I want people to learn from that. And we even had the conviction before this that we moved for the church. I mean, that's why we came back to Bozeman. That's why we did move ourselves into the position that we are further out of town, so that we could be there long term. But 2020 changed things for a lot of people. It changed a lot for us. We had a child in 2020. That changed everything, not to mention the pandemic. So we're in a position now where I'm preaching once a month at a church in a very small town, very similar to the size of yours. Big influx in the summer as well, around 400, 500 people in the winter. And I'm curious what advice you would give us in pursuing change in our community and the building of koinonia, fellowship.
Advice other than listen to your elders?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, listen to your elders. It's biblical, it's smart, it's wise. So.
Oh man. Yeah. So it's like someone in your situation. So you're in a small town. There's not a terribly intentional, healthy church there, but there might be some folks who want to be.
Yes.
You're kind of participating in that, but there's very little structure. There's very little organization. So what I'm about to say are not my own thoughts. I rarely do I have an original thought, but this has been articulated elsewhere. But your options are, there's a couple options for staying, and those options are you can work for change, you can work for reformation. So that's one option. If you have some people who are willing to play ball, they don't know what they ought to be doing right now, but they're willing to learn, and there's motivation and there's faith and there's potential there. You could participate in reformation and bringing change and bringing some vitality and organization and biblical structure to that church. If you're going to go down that road, the question you need to ask honestly is, has God put what it's going to take here to do that? And so, like, if you're the only one saying,
What do you mean to take?
Well, so for example, you don't need people sitting around saying, "Man, I wish things are different." You need people putting their boots on, saying, "How do we fix this?" If it's just you, that's a bit more bleak. God can use a single person or a married couple to bring about that change. You've got to search, has God made me to do that? Can I be the instigator? Do I have the patience? Do I have the faith? Do I have the long suffering? Do I have what it takes to do this for the long haul and work very slowly to get things to that point? Am I that guy? If you're not that guy, well, then I don't know what to tell you. Then that's probably not an option. If you have a bunch of guys who are on board and who are ready to play ball, then I'd say you've got something to work with. Call some other churches, get some advice, get some counsel. How do we do this? How do we organize? What does biblical church government look like? What should our polity be? How do we define doctrine? These sorts of things. How do we make elders? What should we have standards for ordination? Those sorts of things. You've got to explore that. Now that's if you have people on board willing to work for reformation. The other option is, if you don't have any of that, do you start a brand new effort? And to start a brand new effort, again, you've got to answer that question yourself. Am I the one to start something new? In an ideal world, you're being sent and commissioned to start something new. That's what we call the internal call, is me saying, I think I can do this. I think God has put this in me. I think I have the faith for that. And then there's the external call, which is typically coming from trusted Christians around you, namely church leadership, saying, yes, we see this in you. We affirm this in you. We commission you. We send you. We want to support you. So again, your two options: working for reformation at an existing church or starting something from the ground up. If neither of those two options are a possibility, you can do the Band-Aid option, which is drive a really long way to participate with a church just for an hour or two on Sunday and then come back home and be disconnected from that body the rest of the week, right? As long as you are in a place and you haven't left that place yet, or you can't leave, if that's your only option, that's better than nothing, but it's not sustainable.
No, it's not.
It's not sustainable. Right, it's not sustainable.
You cannot.
So I would say with all of those three things in place, if those options 1 and 2 aren't on the table, I'd say you can only do option 3 until something changes.
Which is?
Well, something changes, meaning either 1 or 2 suddenly becomes an option, or you get out of town, and you go to a place where you can participate in something healthy and biblical that God is doing.
Where would you go?
Where would I go?
Yeah.
Bayview.
Bayview.
Yeah. Why? That's what I did.
Yeah.
I can't tell you where to go.
No, you can't tell anybody, but yeah. I mean, I don't know where I was going with that.
I don't know either. That's a weird question.
Recommendations, I guess, or places that you would go. Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty good. I think. I don't want to end on that though, but.
I mean, if there's one last thing I'd want to give a soundbite about, it's about small town churches being intentional.
What do you mean being intentional?
Like they can't wing it anymore. Remember that whole bit.
So
that's just something I feel strongly about.
Yeah. Well, please, a little bit more. Will you tell me about what you mean by that?
So I'm about to speak in caricatures. So what I'm about to say does not apply to all small town churches. So please keep that in mind. But I will say that it has been fairly common for me to observe in my lifetime that many small town churches are very unintentional with what they're doing. They might be unintentional by way of their eldership standards, for example. Oh, you're over 50. Oh, you're still married to your wife. Oh, you've never killed anybody.
Yeah.
Do you want to be an elder? No. There's no test. Can you sign off on this statement of faith? No. I'm not asking you to open the Bible and defend your statement of faith. I'm just asking, can you sign it?
Or like a sign-up sheet for elders.
Right.
Oh, every month we switch elders.
These are weak. These are horrible standards for eldership.
Yep.
That's very unintentional. It might be unintentionality with the Sunday gathering where we just totally wing it, right? So it's like you go, if you do announcements, say at the start of your gathering and then you finish. Did I miss anything? Oh yeah, Betty, and you're just communicating to everyone who's there, including visitors, that we don't really put a lot of intentionality into what we're here to worship the triune God, and He's given us prescriptions for that in His Bible, and so to wing it or to bring in all extra things that really have nothing to do with the worship of the triune God, you'd save that for later, right? We can sing happy birthday later. And yes, I've been to churches where they sing happy birthday at the church service. Yeah. So there are churches, a lot of small town churches, I would say lack intentionality. It's almost impossible to find a small town church with like a robust discipleship program or any plan for outreach or something like that. And so my word to small town churches would be, you can't afford to do that anymore. You can't afford to be weak on your eldership. You can't afford to be weak in the pulpit. You can't afford to be weak with discipling your people because of this thing called the internet, because of this thing called social media. The woke cult is coming to you. It's already in your town. The pastor's kid goes into his bedroom and he's watching this trans guy on TikTok who's already had 3 million views or whatever. My brother who lives in central Montana, there's a real small town right down the road, a Class C school, small school, wheat and barley farmers, and there's a boy in that high school who thinks he's a girl. In good old rural North Central red state Montana. And how are people going to handle that? And if you're thinking, oh, that can't come to the small towns. No, it's absolutely coming to the small towns. It already is. It might come to you last, but it's coming to you. It's coming to you. So you can't afford to be unintentional. My advice to small town churches would be, now is the time to take seriously things that you have neglected for years. Develop ordination standards. Clarify your doctrine. Have a plan for addressing all the sexual craziness that's going on in our culture. Have answers for what biblical justice means. Things that you never thought you'd really have to address because everybody's generally on the same culturally conservative page. You need a plan, and you need it like yesterday.
Yeah. Don't wait till you're in it, as we heard Doug Wilson say tonight. Wait till you're inside of whatever moment it is, and it's bad, and you don't know how to react, and neither does your church, and you have no church to even act upon with. So
Correct. Unintentional churches right now in small towns, if they stay unintentional, they will be completely infiltrated, and they'll have nothing to stand on, and they'll collapse.
yeah, that's scary.
But they're not beyond hope.
No.
Because just like that woke mob cult is coming to them via the internet, there's no end to the excellent resources available to churches, to elders, theological training. There's all kinds of resources out there. You just need to put on your intentional hat and start looking for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good word to end on, is put on your intentional hat.
Maybe it comes in camo.
Maybe, preferably.
Full circle.
Full circle. Well, thank you, Joel. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Hopefully we'll have you on again.
That'd be great.